It's very clear. If we look at these temptations, I don't know about you, but I would have failed on the first one. Anybody love bread more than me? You know, I used to live beside Panera. I couldn't walk to class in the morning without a detour. And it just seemed like, well, and then I find Einstein brothers, you know, after I've moved to another place. It always seems to be turn a rock into bread. Come on. How many of us would have failed? We know, you know. And he was starving. Hadn't eaten for days. I mean, if I go more than an hour or two, you know, my navel starts rubbing my backbone. It makes the awfulest noise. Y'all probably heard it up here before. It's just, these are real temptations. Food, power, safety. I mean, look at what he's being tempted with at a time. But we can read right through it because we already know who Jesus is. And we already know that if Jesus is being tempted by the evil forces, why do we think we could be immune? How could we possibly think, oh, that wouldn't bother me, that wouldn't get me? Look, you know, think about the things that you're really weak about. Think about them. And you don't have to blurt them out loud, but we know. There's lots of things you could have put on this list other than these three, and they're not there. No gambling, no women or men, and the list goes on. However, I think the real truth of the thing is that the people I'm preaching to from week to week to week to week, I don't have to come down on you. I don't have to point out to you and so forth anything about women, liquor, or gambling, or any of that. But probably more, the truth of it is what we're guilty of is that temptation. How many people knew it was 25 degrees and the wind blowing this morning when you were still in that cave? You know what I'm talking about? Them covers pulled up to your neck. And you thinking, well, I'll just sleep in today. Yeah. Yeah, we're tempted. We're tempted all the time. Temptation is all around us. It's a temptation, it's a reversal from being tempted to do something to temptation of omission, of not doing, omission, not doing what we're asked to be do. And we know, and you've heard me before say this, that should there be a point in time when I stand in front of the great judge, I don't expect being asked, why did you do? I think God already knows that. God already knows we've got weaknesses. God already knows our tendencies and so forth. I think what I'm going to be hearing is, why didn't you? Why didn't you? You had, I entrusted with you. I gave you everything you needed. You had the resources and the funds. You had the ability. I gave you the wisdom. I gave you the training. And you had the opportunity and you fell short. I think that's the reality of standing in here and preaching to a house full of sinners and saints. That's sinners saved by grace. That what we're going to have to answer is, why didn't we? Why didn't we use what it was that God had entrusted us? I understand those other temptations. Being a diabetic, I am so thankful that I am not just plagued with the addiction of sweets. I watch my brothers and sisters sometimes, and it seems as though a lot of people who have sugar diabetes, it seems to be like an addiction, very much like, you know, booze to an alcoholic, or so forth and so on. But I understand the nature of that, and if I can just completely leave it alone, but you know what happens? It's Valentine's, right? And you're going to take Sweetie out, and you're going to have a good meal, and then the waiter's going to come over and say, have you seen our list of desserts? church. Death by chocolate. Literally. And then we get down to the bread pudding. Have I told you I like bread? Now we're adding sugar and butter and rum and all kinds of flavors and stuff to it. And then even use the chocolates or raisins or maybe both and so forth. And Sweetie says, sure, bring 1 and 2 spoons. We have to at least take a bite, right? Well, why not to? I understand that very well. All of us. All of us have those temptations to do things we don't need to do. Temptations to do things maybe we shouldn't do. And at the same time, the reverse is also true. Let's talk just a second about identifying our weaknesses. That we all know that we have weaknesses, we have tendencies, and so forth. And I think Lent is a time that we get somewhere and we look in the mirror, not as a group. Okay? We don't need a mirror that big. But we get us a mirror and we really look at ourselves in the mirror. And then we see what Jesus is really tempted with. When you start looking at this, who was Jesus? I mean, we know who Jesus was. We know Jesus already had the power. We know Jesus already knew the devil was lying through his teeth when he took him there and he said, look out over all these kingdoms, and I have the authority to tell you that you can have it all. We know that Jesus already had that authority, and the devil didn't. He knew he was lying through his teeth to have the kind of power that he had. So when we read this, and we know better than what it's telling us, but what's he saying? Line up with me. Just have a relationship with me. That's what he's wanting to do. He said, just bow down to me. Have a relationship with me. Now, wait a second. We can't have it both ways. This is where the problem is. So how do we not get tricked? How do we not get into that situation? It's easy. It's simple. We just continue to live a life of holy habits. We continue to live a life to where we're feeding on what we need to be feeding on. That we begin each and every day thanking God for a night's rest and asking God to lead and guide us through each and every day. And promising God that I'm going to do my absolute best given the situation that I'm in. Some days the situation's a lot harder than others. Sometimes the temptations are a lot stronger than others. Who understands that better than God? But as we build our relationship stronger and stronger and stronger, one-on-one, us and God, as we do that, then we're not allowing any relationship to be built where it don't need to be. And because of that, we are making ourselves more willing to be obedient to do what it is that God is asking us and calling us to do. And I promise you, there's nothing greater in your life than knowing that you are doing what God needs you to do. I hope and I pray that each and every one of you are living your lives doing what you believe God needs you to do. At this point in time, that may change over time. When we look away from God, it's mighty easy for us to be drawn into the wrong circles. Having those holy habits allow us to really live our lives as moral agents of God. Y'all heard me use that word, moral agent, that term, moral agents, before. It's not my term. It comes from John Wesley. Moral agents of God's love. Pray with me. God, we do.